Hi, all. Just thought I'd make a quick video going over how I have my Unholy Death Knight set up in terms of gear, in terms of talents, glyphs, and also macros and basic rotation, all that good stuff. So let's start out with the talents. Um, Main idea when you're doing Unholy is you have to accept that you're not supposed to be destroying targets. I played Frost for the longest time, and I originally hated Unholy because I just run at somebody and try to beat them up as much as I can, and that doesn't work. You can still do that, but you got to play a little more conservatively because your role is to basically nerf everyone on the opposite team. At least that's how I view it, as opposed to picking one target and just destroying it. So I go with Plague Bearer because Necrotic Plague is, like, every time that I look at my damage meters, it's always about half my damage at the end of the game. Um, and also, Unholy gives you the ability to kite as well as do alright damage at range, so I want to be able to just stack up Necrotic Plague whenever I can. Lichborn, same as always. If you don't know why you need Lichborn, you need Lichborn. Chillbanes. So, one thing that Unholy can do that Frost cannot is actually kite. With Frost, you've basically got Howling Blast, and that's all you can do. Well, and then if you get Death Siphon, but still. Between the two of those, you're not doing a whole lot of damage at range. With Unholy, you can get Icy Touch, you can do Death Siphon, you can do Death Coil, and all the while you're healing yourself, and if you have Chillbane's on, you're also slowing the target. And again, with Necrotic Plague plus Blood Boil, you can go into a whole group of the enemy, just throw Necrotic Plague on one target, and then hit Blood Boil, and now the entire other team, 5, 6 enemy targets, however many there are, all of their movement speed is reduced by 50%. It makes things a lot easier for you, seeing as how you already have increased movement speed as Unholy Death Knight, and it makes everything easier for the group you're with. Runic Empowerment, kind of a toss-up between the two of these, depending on what you think might be more valuable. I like the idea of throwing out Death Coil and suddenly having abilities available, but that's kind of a toss between these two. Death Siphon and Conversion, it's kind of a tough decision. I originally went with Conversion because I figured, hey, this is something that can heal me using Runic Power, and I can still use Death Strike to use runes in order to heal myself. But especially with Unholy, so many of your runes, maybe 10 seconds into the fight or less, are already death runes. You can knock out 4 of these at range and heal yourself up real quick. And again, if you're kiting a target, this makes things a lot easier too. Or if they're trying to kite you, this makes things a lot easier to heal yourself. So I ended up going with Death Siphon. I really like it so far. Desecrated Ground and Remorseless Winter, again, well, not again, but you can kind of choose which of these is your flavor. I personally like Desecrated Ground just because I'm slowing all my targets, and if on top of that I have ranged abilities, and I also have what boils down to 2 trinkets, I should never be getting kited. And there are lots of times where I'll be guarding a flag and whatnot that, we'd be SOL if I didn't have Desecrated Ground. And then Necrotic Plague, again, this spreads to the entire enemy team very quickly, especially when you combine it with Blood Boil. And it does a lot of damage. Like, as Unholy at the end of every game, like I said earlier, roughly half of all my damage is Necrotic Plague. And, during a game, every 2 seconds, if you've got full stacks, you're getting like 7,500 per tick, and that's without a crit. Like, I've seen Necrotic Plague crit for me for, like 12k. And I mean, like 12k every 2 seconds on top of all the other melee damage and strikes that you're doing. That's a lot. The only other option that I see viable for Unholy is, well, right now, my philosophy is I'm just constantly dragging down the other team in terms of movement speed and in terms of Necrotic Plague. The other option I see is taking an Unholy Blight as well as Breath of Syndragosa. Pop that, and then if you pop summon Gargoyle all at the same time, you've got some serious burst DPS. I prefer to do more consistent, slightly elevated damage, but if you just want to be a beast monster, first off, you might want to consider going Frost. But if you really like the playstyle of Unholy, that's one way to get some serious burst going. In terms of glyphs, Glyph of Icy Touch, again, I view myself as I'm just constantly nerfing the other team. So having that glyph is very important for me, you know, especially if you're going against, you know, someone who's got a druid healer or any kind of hot. You know, you just throw a couple icy touches on them and their heal's gone. It also works on different shields and absorbs, like, it's great. Blood Boil, again, I view myself as I'm just constantly nerfing the group, the enemy group. So being able to have 5 more yards of Blood Boil, tossing out Necrotic Plague to everyone immediately as soon as I enter a fight, slowing everyone's movement speed, that's real important to me, so I like having that glyph. And then again, I don't know how Blizzard actually had this at 3 runic power every 1 second. Now it's only 2, it's still insanely valuable. I mean, you're constantly getting struck by movement impairing effects, so that's a lot of runic power for you. The minor glyphs aren't really important, they're more for fun and aesthetics, but I will say, Glyph of Path of Frost, I throw Path of Frost on like all the time, and it becomes insanely useful because of how many times you'll fall from a distance where you'll, you know, lose like 5-7% of your health. It's annoying, but when it comes down, you know, to some battles, maybe you would have won that if you hadn't, you know, screwed yourself over with that, you know, 8-9k of health or whatever it was. So now on to my basic rotation. I've got Icy Touch here. Again, I'm constantly dispelling my target. Festering Strike here, just to add a couple more seconds to Necrotic Plague. Thing is, with your main target, you can get full stacks of Necrotic Plague, throw Festering Strike on there, and now your full stacks of Necrotic Plague are extended by, I think, like 4 or 6 seconds, something like that. So if you got a target who's constantly getting, you know, 7,500 damage to him every 2 seconds, then you throw Festering Strike on there, that's 12 seconds, which means 6 times, you know, 7k, was that 42? That's 42k, assuming none of them multi-strike, assuming none of them crit. It's a lot of damage, and Festering Strike is important. But I basically only use it to just extend Necrotic Plague. It's not in my main, just I'm beating up a guy trying to do some damage. This right here is a macro I have put together. There it is. That's just I'm in front of a guy and I want to hit him a lot, and I just spam that button. I know some people might be saying new, but honestly I don't care, I win, so whatever. But Scourge Strike, I threw a Plague Strike in there. It doesn't do a lot of damage on its own, but there are times when Icy Touch will be on cooldown, and you know, maybe they've dispelled Necrotic Plague. I want to make sure that Necrotic Plague is up on my target all the time. So I threw Plague Strike in there just in case, so I can keep hitting that and it'll get Necrotic Plague up on my target. Other than Scourge Strike, which is just your basic, do a good amount of damage to your target, I also want to have Soul Reaper up on the target all the time. As Unholy Death Knights, we get the extra damage at the end of the timer of Soul Reaper when the target's below 45% health. It's basically, if it's lower than half health, you're going to do another 30k at least to your target. So it's good to have that Soul Reaper and Necrotic Plague need to be on your target basically as much as possible. From there I have Death Coil, which is just a go-to, and basically these 4 buttons are my main rotation, and then Blood Boil's in there as well. But I'll enter a fight with Icy Touch, dispel something, get Necrotic Plague on him, hit him a couple times with this macro right here, maybe throw a Festering Strike or 2 on there, and then I'm throwing Death Coil at him whenever I can, because I've got no other ability that I'm using regularly that uses runic power, so I might as well use Death Coil. And that's also adding stacks of Necrotic Plague. Also, early on in a fight, if there's a group, I'll also toss out Blood Boil. Blood Boil's also the only ability that you have, well, either that I'm using, it might be that you have too, that uses a blood rune, and you've got two of them. So by using Blood Boil, you turn it into a death rune, and you're constantly throwing your Necrotic Plague out at everyone on the opposite team. But it also makes it available to use with any other ability. So you might as well have two more rooms at your disposal. Other than that, I've got this macro called Pwn, which basically just has Summon Gargoyle and Empower Rune Weapon on a timer. Let me see if I can find it where to go. There we go. So yeah, cooldown of Summon Gargoyle is 3 minutes. So after 3 minutes or 180 seconds, it resets this cast sequence. So if I hit this button, at first it summons Gargoyle, and if 3 minutes haven't gone by, it empowers Rune Weapon. It helps me to have a bit of burst either way. It's not a ton of burst either way, but it's nothing, and it can make the difference between winning a fight or not. This is my interrupt slash spell defense macro. Let me bring it up here. So, in essence, what happens is it mind freezes if I'm in range of my target, and at the same time, it activates anti-magic shell. Or if I'm a distance away from my target, it obviously can't activate mind freeze. It just activates anti-magic shell. So either way, if there's a caster or any sort of magic, anything going on that I don't want going on, I hit that button. It's either going to interrupt or it's going to cast my anti-magic shell. This is my macro for basically my trinkets. I hit this button once, I use my racial, and at the same time I also activate Lichborn, so that way, you know, if I break free from something, they don't immediately fear me or charm me or whatever it happens to be. So I'm basically free for from one, you know, ability that needs a trinket, and then for the next 10 seconds there's a really good chance that they're not going to be able to get me again. But if they do, I press this again. Here, I'll just bring up the macro so you can see it. I just bring this up again, and then it'll use my Desecrated Ground. So I have two trinkets right there, both off the same button. One thing I'll point out though is, and if anyone out there knows how to improve this macro, please put it in the comments. But if you die and res, and let's say you used every man for himself and then you immediately died, when you res, this macro resets itself. So if I get feared by something and I hit my macro, it's going to try and use this ability, and I'm not able to because it's still on cooldown, and it won't use this ability until it uses this ability. So even though I have a trinket available, I'm not able to use it by pressing that button. So it costs me 2 seconds every now and then when I gotta mouse over and hit Desecrated Ground. It's annoying. If anyone knows a way of making this better, please put it in the comments. Other than that, this is a macro I have for just healing myself and using Death Siphon. I'm not going to even bring up the macro because it's super simple. All it is just to use Death Siphon, and at the same time it activates my trinket that has a little heal on it. Which one is it? Yeah, increases health by that much. So I hit that button once, and in essence I heal myself for 70k. Death Grip, you got to have that. Death Strike, again, that's tied to the same trinket. Blood Boil, I talked about that enough already. And then Dark Transformation. I'm not using this all the time. You know, you're using Dark Transformation maybe 6 times per BG. So it needs to be accessible, but it doesn't need to be as accessible as a lot of other abilities, so I have it there. I think that's pretty much it. Yeah, glyphs, talents, macros, rotations. It's all that good stuff. Before 6.2, Unholy, I was just crazy out DPSing Frost DKs. Now it's kind of a toss-up, 50-50. So if you want to be more of a player that just picks one target and destroys it, go Frost. It's really fun. It's really straightforward. I like the little bit of variability that comes with being Unholy, and I like the ability to kite as well, especially in duels. Like, dueling as an Unholy DK, like, is awesome. I destroy Frost Death Knights, it's not even funny. But just decide what type of role you want to play, and I highly suggest you check out Unholy. It's really fun. And with that, I think that's the end of this video, guys. Thanks for watching, and I hope it helped you out. Have fun playing the Unholy spec.